how to destroy every d4 variation with pawn to e5. Like for real, this is one move that we ignore in the d4 opening when we are playing black. So white starts with d4. You don't know what to play and you have to win or make a quick draw, right? As always, you can start with knight c6, the Mike-Pest defense. This video is not about the knight sacrifice line where we start giving those perpetual checks with our queen in an effort to make a quick draw and go home fast. Nope. In fact, when you play this opening response in a serious classical match, video rated, most of your opponents will be playing knight f3 on move 1 because they don't know what you're up to with this knight c6 move. Obviously, they know you are not an amateur, so they won't just push pawn to d5 right away. You know, if they push pawn to d5, it's time to celebrate because you're going to win in less than 10 moves or make a quick draw. But wait, instead of knight f3, what if white plays the second most played move, c4? I'm not going to look at this in detail, but I just want to let you know that yes, you can play the move pawn to e5 in this line, and after d5, you straight away transpose these back to the Nimzowitsch defense, where you relocate your queen's knight to the king side like this. Although after pawn to e4, I always advise to go pawn to d6 so that you don't give white any chance to play c5 or d6 themselves. So instead of knight g6, you just go d6 anyway, and after bishop d3, you go knight f6, knight f3, knight g6, castle short, h6, b6, a5, and so on and so forth. Your argument here is you just forced white to go back to the e4, e5 lines without them even realizing. So now you know the idea that even against a queen's pawn game, you can still play pawn to e5 with no any problems. E.g., if pawn to c4, just go e5. If they take, well and good. This is no longer the queen's pawn game if you think about it, because you have full control on the e5 square after knight takes. By the way, if knight f3, you just take a free pawn. So this is why they play pawn to e3. And then a theoretical move, you guys, bishop d6. Yes, you can play knight f6 and develop normally, and castle short, play pawn to d6 later on, paving the way for your light squared bishop. But bishop d6 comes with a hidden idea. If knight f3, you just take, oversimplifying the game. Then you play knight f6, say bishop d3, castle short, you continue with your normal development. This is no longer the queen's pawn game where you have to worry about knight f3 and knight e5, supported by the d4 pawn in many lines. But anyways, today's video is not about this queen's gambit setup. We want to see what to do against knight f3. See, we are only remaining with very few subscribers to reach 60,000. Guys, we can actually do this together. There is the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. And if you have, be kind enough to share this video or my videos to a wider audience. If you don't do any of those, there's a high chance you will never see me ever again on YouTube, because YouTube won't be recommending my videos to you. After knight f3, the top played move, what I recommend to do is to continue playing an attacking game. And what can be more attacking than the Budapest? Never be afraid to play this even in a real video rated match over the board. See, once again, the whole idea is just to go pawn to e5 if white allows. Now pause. There are 5 types of d4 players that you should know. Always remember this whenever you reach this position with your 2 knights out against the queen's pawn game, this exact setup. So there are those who like playing queen's gambit setups with d4 and c4 immediately or later in the game. This is what we see in the Lichess database. Pawn to c4 is the top played move. Type number 2 are those who like combining the queen's gambit ideas with the London system ideas, and sometimes bishop g5. Type number 3 are those who like playing the London system right away. Type number 4, the system players who don't develop their dark squad bishop early. And the last type of d4 players are those who like playing Fianchetto systems and sometimes transpose the game back to the Catalan in the middle game. So those are the 5 types of d4 players you need to be aware of. Maybe the 6th type of d4 players, I would say, is those guys who like transposing between openings. Sometimes they start with knight f3, you don't know what they are up to, and then they go into the reti, then involve d4 or go straight into the Catalan. That's how complicated the d4 opening can be. So I just wanted you to have a strong foundation and understanding. So we begin with the queen's gambit setup, where white plays pawn to c4 immediately. This is the line that may transpose back to the Budapest, where you play pawn to e5 immediately. If they take with the pawn, well and good, you have to go knight g4. And remember this position, this is simply the Budapest, where you develop bishop b4 check after, say, bishop f4 holding on to their pawn. Then you go bishop b4, check. After knight bd2, remember this classic Budapest trap that begins with queen e7. Then after a3, you ignore the bishop attack and take on e5 with your g knight. If knight takes, you just take back. Maybe if they take your bishop, you smoother mate them like this. So this is simply the Budapest, no question about it. But wait, in the Budapest, it's not every time you're going to see your opponents missing this simple, smoother checkmate trap. In fact, in this position, white can just play pawn to e3, not allowing this smoothed mate to happen. And these are moments where you need to realize that your bishop is under attack for real. So you need to get rid of it. As always, that's what we do in the Budapest. And the moment white takes, what do you do with your center knight? That's the big question in the Budapest. Well, simple. You just leave it there for good. How? You play pawn to d6 and forget about it. Any advanced player will never take on e5 because they won't like to give up their bishop pair. That's one. And if they do so, they are just helping you to place your pawn on a better square, so they are not going to do that. They play something like bishop e2, after which you just castle short, and after they castle short, you start playing normal chess. Leave your knight on e5 for good. They are going to struggle, believe it or not. Not to mention that your knight is also eyeing this weak c4 pawn. So from here, you can play moves like rook e8, even pawn to b6 makes sense, with an idea of putting your last squad bishop on b7. Or start with a5. Anything you do here is justifiable. For example, if I were you, I would play b6. It looks great. If bishop f3, I would just take. The top played move here by far is pawn to b4, after which it makes sense to play bishop b7 now, having full control along this diagonal. And from here, I don't know what white should do, honestly speaking. Just leave your knight on e5 and develop other pieces. Trust me, they won't do anything. Sometimes, before playing rook a d8, consider playing a5 and everything will be awesome. So that's how you play the Budapest like a professional. Back to our initial position where white plays pawn to c4 and then we go e5. Question: what do we do if white doesn't take back with the pawn? Because that allows us to transpose the game to the Budapest from the Mike-Pest. Remember, these started as the Mike-Pest defense but later on transposed into the Budapest. So what do we do after knight takes? Well, this is still playable even in a serious federated match. So you start with knight takes e5. They are going to take back, and then just like in the Budapest, you still go knight g4. You just want to get back your pawn. In fact, this is a simplified version of the Budapest in that white will play bishop a4 as always, trying to hold on to their e5 pawn and also just developing their minor piece with tempo. This is where you go bishop b4 check like in the normal Budapest. They play knight d2 most of the times because knight c3 will allow us to mess up their pawn structure on the queen side, maybe in the long run after playing queen e7 first. That's why they like playing knight d2 in most cases. And then you still go queen e7. By the way, even after knight c3, you just play queen e7 before taking. That's okay. After pawn to a3, as always, what do you do? Think about it. Well, remember, this is the simplest version of the Budapest. You don't have to rush taking on d2. Just take on e5 with the same idea of mating your opponent with a smoothed checkmate. This time, if your opponent takes your knight, which you intended to leave on e5 for good, you first of all start with bishop takes d2. If you take the bishop right away, you're going to be down a piece. So you equalize material like this, and after queen takes, this is when you take back with your queen. And now from here, it is just anyone's game where a more tactically sharp player will have to win this game. You will castle short, play d6, or after castling short, just play b6, put your last squad bishop on the most active square, controlling this highlighted diagonal as we saw earlier, and you are going to have a good game. The best part of the Budapest is that you won't have to worry about this d4 and knight e5 combo that we see in the normal queen's pawn game. But hey, wait, we see that bishop f4 is the top played move in the Lichess database. But here there's one beautiful trap that I want to show you guys. What if white plays the second most played move, queen d4, or the third common move, f4? Let's begin with queen d4. This looks scary, but it is nothing, trust me. In fact, Stockfish says the game is getting back to equal if white does this. So what you do is give up a second pawn. Yes, even in a real OTB tournament match, in a federated tournament, you can play like this. After ED, you just want to take back with your bishop. The purpose is to be ahead in development and open up many lines. So your bishops are going to be super active. Like here, you're even attacking the h2 pawn if you think about it. You're one move away from giving a check. And wait, it looks like the g7 pawn is a free pawn in this position. Once white does this, just know you're winning due to bishop e5. The queen is trapped. Oh, what if they play bishop g5? Well, first, bishop takes is okay, because after white takes your queen, you're going to take back with tempo. You're going to be up a piece. But you don't have to give up your queen like this. Just go queen d4, and white is going to lose their queen still. If they play bishop f6, even though you can take, there's a better intermediate move. Queen takes f2 check, and wherever the king goes, that's how you win a free queen. Going back a few moves, let's say after queen d4, white doesn't play bishop f6, where you take on f2, and say they play e3. Well, again, you can just go ahead and take. Look at these threats and this. Again, bishop f6, queen takes f2, check. And here there's a mate in 2 if I'm not mistaken, like this. Yep, pop. Right, instead of pawn to e3 right in this position, what if white plays bishop e3? Again, you can just go bishop takes. The queen is still under attack. But anyways, once again, after knight takes, pawn takes, knight g4, and queen d4, then this, you might ask, what if white plays queen g5 instead of bishop g5? I mean, after you play bishop e5, obviously. If white plays queen g5, the best you can do is just to take. After bishop takes, there's a free pawn on b2 and a free rook, which you need to take advantage of. So at the end of the day, you're still going to be up a piece and up an exchange. Of course, white may do all sorts of tricks like h3 or pawn to f3. You just retreat your knight back, and for some reason they play bishop f6, maybe trying to scare you somehow. I don't know, but the best you can do in this position is just to give up your knight with check. After gf or ef, this is when you take that poor bishop, and you're going to win the rook on the next move. Once again, back to the initial position. The queen's gambit set up. Even though this is not really the queen's gambit, you still go e5, and if white takes with the knight, you take back. After pawn takes, you go knight g4. The idea is to get back your pawn, right? But say this time white plays pawn to f4. What else do they know? The thing is, back in this position, the best white can do is to play bishop f4 or knight c3, just not paying attention to the e5 pawn. That's what Stockfish advises. But if they play anything else like queen d4 as we saw and pawn to f4, just know the game is back to equality. So pawn to f4 is equally bad. Due to this bishop c5 move, who's going to guard the f2 square? They play pawn to e3, a walk of shame. With pawn to e3, remember that they are also attacking your knight. For the record, knight takes e3 is super fantastic, very fine. You can play this and hope to take the bishop, that's fine. But even better, according to my knowledge, is pawn to d6. Why? Because you are paving the way for your light squared bishop, which was doing nothing. At the back, there is no pawn to h3 due to queen h4 check. From there, you will play queen f2 check and probably take on e3, blah blah blah. If white takes the pawn thinking it's free, if you want, this time you can even take with the bishop since your knight is well defended by the light squared bishop. But from a positional point of view, in this position you can just castle short. Knowing white can't take the third pawn, at worst you're just going to end up winning material or play like a professional. Queen takes. If h3, you have this. Let's say queen f3. Again, you can just take. And if bishop takes, you have rook e8. So there are all these tactics that you can play against white. Again, back to the initial position where white just played c4. Remember, first of all, we are looking at the first type of d4 players who like playing the queen's gambit setups like this. You still go pawn to e5. Now, what if they don't take with the knight or with the pawn, but let's say they just advance their d pawn? Two continuations that you may consider: going pawn to e4. After they take, you take, and then this will be a battle of captures. That's okay according to Stockfish. But the line that I recommend, which is equally good according to Stockfish as well, is knight e7. You just want to relocate your queen's knight to the king side like you do in the names of wish defense. By the way, check out my names of wish defense course, which is very awesome and easy to play. Well, after you play knight e7, your opponents will think the e5 pawn is completely free. But just like what I showed you in my names of wish defense course, the only savior you have in this position that most of your opponents will miss is this move, pawn to c6. when you play this move, start waiting for your opponent to blunder or make a long-term positional mistake. As you can see in the Lichess database, the top 3 moves are all blunders. How? For example, if white takes, they lose due to queen a5 check and you're going to win a free knight, just like that. Let's say they don't take on c6 and they play pawn to d6 rather. Once again, you have queen a5 check and that will win the knight for the time being, and after de you take back with your bishop. Stockfish thinks black is ahead in development. They play moves like pawn to g3. Whenever you see g3 in this particular line, think of bishop f4, not just bishop g2. So these are moments you want to play something like bishop b4, a very sneaky move, so that if bishop f4 comes, white loses due to bishop takes with check. After pawn takes, you take back that free pawn. If queen d2, you take a free rook. They have to block with their bishop, not with their elbow. And now you go queen takes c4. Bingo. So clearly we've seen that dc and d6 don't work in this particular line. The other move that fails terribly is knight c3. But the whole idea of playing pawn to c6, you know, is to take on d5. It's oversimplifying the game. And white has to find this Stockfish move. Otherwise, normal looking moves like cd will give you a chance to take back on d5 with your e knight. Looks like white can just win a piece, but we have queen a5 check once again, and we're going to get back our piece. For example, if bishop d2, we just take. If knight c3, we just take on e5 and quickly give away our d pawn to open the position, paving the way for our light squad bishop. For example, after pawn to e3, you want to play d5, but look, there's check. So you might want to play moves like s6 and then pawn to d5 next. Anything you can do here is playable. Even bishop b4 makes sense. You want to take, they play bishop d2. This is when you play castle short and d5. One thing I should mention in the Nimzowitsch defense or in these kinds of positions is that never should you forget about queen a4 check for white. They are going to win your free bishop. So always remember to castle short before playing d6 or pawn to d5. So once again, still in the queen's gambit setup, you just remember to play e5. Again, if d5, feel free to sacrifice your e5 pawn, because at the end of the day, you will set up a nasty trap that your opponent needs to be aware of. The only sensible move in this position, according to Stockfish, is pawn to e4. Even moves like bishop g5 don't make sense due to knight e4. You're just attacking that bishop. If they become stubborn, bishop h4. There are all sorts of tactics. For example, you always have this queen a5 tactical shot. White needs to block on d2 with the knight. And then look at this beautiful trap. You just need to play knight g6 to win the game on move 8. White is going to lose a piece. How? After knight takes, for example, you take on d2 with your knight. They have no time to take on h8 due to a nasty discovery that will lead to mate in 1. So they have to take with their queen and just giving up their queen like this. So you can see that even bishop g5 in this position doesn't work due to that trap I just showed you, and queen a5 check. That's why the only sensible move here is pawn to e4. According to Stockfish, white needs to give up a pawn that we sacrificed. And this is when we take anyways. Again, out of everything, the only sensible move white should play is queen f3, at least targeting to checkmate. And in this position, yes, you can retreat your knight back to f6 if you want, that's fine. But remember, this is an aggressive opening, so we don't need to be defensive. Just go f5, holding on to your knight. If they ever play something like bishop d3, maybe trying to do this, there are so many things you can do. First, you have knight d6 check, and you probably win that pawn, or play queen c7. The idea is that if bishop takes, you just pin that bishop and win it on the next move, or with your pawn. They won't do that. After queen c7, they will probably do something like bishop f4. But again, you have d6. Where is this knight going to go? Maybe knight g4 tactically speaking, but you have h5 if you think about it. Where is this knight going to go? Maybe on e3, but again you have g5. Where is this bishop going to go next? If bishop g3, you have h4 and you're going to win that bishop. Maybe white should first of all take on e4, but still after fe and queen takes, you will be up a piece. So these are just some tactical shots to always remember whenever you are playing this. Anyway, enough of the queen's gambit setup. Go and take it up from there, do more research. Otherwise, just know that this is very much playable even in OTB classical matches, even in real FIDE rated tournaments. And this is for you guys who loved my previous Mikena's defense with knight c6. If your opponents don't play d5, just think of transposing the game back to the Budapest like I showed you. And if pawn to c4, just go e5 next. They always play d5, and that's when you want to play bishop b4 check, transposing the game back to the Nimzowitsch defense. Once again, after knight f3, what if you meet the second type of d4 players who love combining the London system ideas with the Queen's Gambit setup? Yes, after knight f6, they like starting with bishop f4 before playing c4, and this kind of stops pawn to e5, so we're not going to have our normal Budapest, right? But maybe there's a way we can transpose this back to the Budapest after d6.